Thailand, where a time scale has been set for candidates hoping to stand in February's general election. And Thailand's election commission says people who want to stand as party list MPs must register their candidacy between December the 23rd and the 27th. Those aiming to become constituency MPs can then register between December the 28th and January the 1st. Early voting will be held from January the 26th for those unable to cast a vote in the February the 2nd poll. And Thailand has 48 million eligible voters. The whole election is expected to cost the country around $1.2 billion to stage. And Thailand's Pheu Thai party says it's ready to fight the election with Yingluck Shinawatra as its top candidate. And the opposition Democratic Party has yet to confirm whether it will take part. And on Sunday, opposition MPs resigned en masse from Parliament, prompting the Prime Minister to call the election. And now for the latest on the protests in Bangkok, let's talk to our correspondent Tony Chung in Bangkok. Hello there, Tony. First of all, what can you tell us about the ongoing standoff between the anti-government protesters and the Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra?
Well, we have a rather bizarre situation here in Bangkok at the moment where we still have tens of thousands of protesters out on the street, barricading many of the important government ministries and the central government house. And yet we don't really have a government as such. Of course, there's the caretaker government of Yingluck Shinawatra, Pheu Thai, the government that was elected a couple of years ago. But since the house has been dissolved, they're really preparing to fight the election, the details of which you just gave. But the protesters say this isn't over. They don't want an election. They want to put a People's Council in place, an unelected body of academics and experts. It's all a rather woolly idea at this stage. They haven't specified exactly how that would happen. But also the protest leader said last night when he was addressing one of the political rallies outside Government House that he would only stop these protests when Yingluck Shinawatra stepped down and the whole of the Shinawatra family left Thailand.
Anti-government protesters continue their siege of Government House. After the huge rally on Monday and the news that Parliament would be dissolved, the mood is victorious. But the protests have not yet stopped. Even the promise of a new election is not enough. At Parliament, they were preparing for a visit by the Crown Prince to celebrate Constitution Day. But the protest leaders have said the next government here should be an appointed People's Council, a selection of academics and experts, not elected politicians. Following their victory, the protest leaders issued a declaration. In it, they say the current government has violated the Constitution and must be replaced by an appointed body, free from political manipulation. But that has set alarm bells ringing. This hastily arranged meeting of academics had gathered to discuss a defence of Thailand's democratic traditions. Many here feel the protesters' goals are no less than a coup.
Instead of going into the conventional way of doing a coup and coming up with a new constitution, they are trying to reinterpret, finding certain clause in the constitution.
Are you confident that with everything we've seen in the last month, that we will be able to get to February the 2nd and hold an election which gives us a legitimate government?
50%. Still a long way to go. But still this time, Pheu Thai is strongest.
And that explains why the government's offer of an election is not enough. Despite gathering huge crowds in Bangkok, the protesters and their political proxies know that the government will beat them at the ballot box every time.
This is Democracy Monument, built in the 1930s to commemorate the foundation of a constitutional monarchy in Thailand. And there's a feeling here among protesters that their actions in the last couple of weeks have protected that democracy. But the reality is the proposed People's Council, appointed by the protest leaders, is very far from democratic and ultimately returns control to the monarchy.
At this stage, the government and the Prime Minister remain in place, and the protest manifesto is an aspiration, not a fact. But with the police and the army wary of intervention and barely able to maintain control, the future of Thai democracy may need a hero to come to its defense.
Well, there is a real concern here that I think the democratic institution itself is under threat. And I think many people are hoping that we can get to those elections in early February next year without any more incidents upsetting the political scenery even more.
Right, Tony, the protesters are still showing no sign of compromise. So is there any possibility that Yingluck may go further, say, to resigning immediately? And as protests continue, what's expected to happen in the coming days?
Well, as yet, I don't think there is any sign that Yingluck will back down to the point that the protesters want her to step down completely from her role as caretaker prime minister until the elections. She said as much yesterday in a television address, in which she was quite tearful when she talked about the fact that the protesters were demanding that her whole family leave Thailand immediately. There was a deadline last night that Mr. Suthep, the protest leader, had given for her to step down at 10:30 p.m. He didn't specify exactly what was going to happen if she didn't. But I think the real concern here is that with this deadlock in place, there's the possibility that things can only really advance for the protesters if a third party steps in, and that third party will probably be the military. At this stage, I don't think the military is remotely interested in doing so. They were involved in the 2006 coup, and I think they saw the damage that had done. And this time they're very much impartial observers on the sidelines. In some cases they've acted as in a peacekeeping role as a negotiator, but I don't think they want to get involved. Nonetheless, with the rhetoric that's coming from the protesters and the stance we see from the government, it's going to be very hard to see any kind of resolution to this crisis in the next couple of months.
Thank you very much indeed. Tony Chong reporting from Bangkok.